Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. How you all doing out there, gang? Remember, please keep those messages coming in. I'll answer all your questions. And if you'd like to come on the show, keep those pictures coming in too. But today, I have Maurice Mortell, Managing Director of Equinix Ireland, who's going to be joining me on the podcast today. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with Equinix, they're a global data center and interconnection platform with 229 data centers across 29 countries. And the company's objectives are to help enterprise customers mitigate operational risk whilst greatly reducing exposure to cybercrime and ultimately safeguard their data. And after learning how global trends around digital transformation and regulatory compliance have propelled Equinix's growth trajectory as more and more top-tier enterprises and providers routinely harness Equinix's global platform to bring together and interconnect the foundational infrastructure that fuels their success. Man, that was my kind of language, so I wanted to get him on here and find out more. And the company has also recently commissioned an independent study of 127 senior IT decision makers in Ireland, illustrating the prevailing sentiments pertaining to security challenges linked to remote working for businesses nationwide. So we've got a lot to talk about today, so buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Ireland so we can speak with Maurice about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Maurice Mortell. I'm currently the Managing Director for Equinix in Ireland. I've over 25 years experience in the data center sector. I started off as CEO of an Irish company called Data Electronics, which was an IT services company that we evolved into a data center provider in the last 5 years, up to 2011. We sold that company to Telecity Group, who are an English to FTSE 250 company in 2011. And I stayed on to serve as country manager for Ireland for that entity. And then a couple of years into that role, I took on a role for Vice President of Emerging Markets. For Telecity was sort of businesses we bought in Eastern Europe, so Poland, Bulgaria, and Turkey. And Telecity was acquired in 2016 by Equinix. And so current role for Equinix is MD is Ireland, as I said. And I've also recently taken on a leadership role in looking after Equinix's sustainability program for the region.
And you have had there such a fantastic career in technology. And I want to drill down into that a little bit more in a moment. But before we do begin, can I ask that you share your origin story? Where was it that your love of technology came from? And ultimately, what was it that put you on the path that you're on today?
Well, I'll be very honest with you. I went into data electronics as a credit controller. So I did business studies in university. And technology was far away from where I thought I'd end up. I had early on aspirations to play professional rugby, so that took up a lot of my time while I was in university and my early career. But to be honest with you, it's really the way the data electronics evolved over the decade that I was there that sort of captured the industry. And I suppose we got in quite early as the data center industry started to grow and evolve in Ireland in the late 90s. And we sort of got ahead of a lot of the foreign direct investment that came in later on to sort of grow the industry to where it is now today.
I love that. And one of the reasons I ask that of every guest is how no matter what plans we might have had 20, 30 years ago, the role that serendipity plays and the universe just kind of points us in the right direction to make sure we are where we need to be when we need to be. And
I think a lot of the stuff, just a lot of the sort of role performances, the sort of duties I perform would be specific to any person leading a business. So, those things that I learned doing accountancy and stuff in college sort of stood to me later on, even though the industry is technology. I suppose that's the that's probably the difference.
100% with you on that. And here in 2021, can you tell us a little bit more about Equinix and the company's mission that you're on now, just for people listening and hearing about you for the first time?
Sure. So Equinix has been going 20 years, but I suppose over the last 5 years, it's gone through some very considerable growth. Equinix now considers itself the world's first digital infrastructure company. We've over 229 data centers across 29 countries. So we would have the largest global footprint of any data center provider. And I suppose really what that enables us to do is sell a very interconnected service for digital ecosystems. So we've grown up by there's over 10,000 customers sitting inside those 229 data centers over a 10-year period. And we're able to interconnect businesses, partners, ecosystems with each other. So people can sort of grow with agility and scale within our ecosystem and on our platform. So it is what started off as kind of take some hosting services has now evolved into a much more intricate business proposal for businesses.
And just to bring that to life a little bit, can you tell me a little bit more about Equinix Fabric and the kind of problems that you're solving for your customers out there?
Sure. So Fabric is probably our signature offering at the moment. So if you think of those 229 data centers, they are all connected on a fiber network. And inside those data centers are, we call them edge nodes, access to cloud service providers. So irrespective of what data center you're in, you can connect onto our Fabric and connect into any cloud service provider, either in that location or in any other location. So we're able to interconnect, with high sort of speeds, high levels of security seamlessly to any of those cloud service providers. That's effectively what it is. It also gives you the ability to run your own network. So that there's a private network effectively connecting all those sites and countries and regions up. And if you want to just connect up your own digital infrastructure through that without using a cloud service provider, you can also use it on that network, which is quite unique as well.
And I think so much has changed in the last 18 months alone. We've gone from working in offices to remote working to now hybrid working. And of course, there's an IT infrastructure that makes all that possible. And I'm kind of curious, what are some evolving trends in the data center space in recent years that you've encountered?
Well, I suppose so. Very recently, as you touched on there, I mean, the pandemic has accelerated, digital transformation. I think a lot of enterprises were probably not as prepared as they thought they were, for something like this, albeit sort of coming out of left field, that they weren't necessarily able to support remote working. They weren't necessarily able to support their own ability to grow and scale their businesses outside of their own locations. So that's certainly accelerated activity from our point of view. Sustainability is a big part of the agenda now, and that's a topic that we might get to talk a bit later on about. But certainly, that's high on the agenda now when I'm talking to any of our stakeholders, customers, investors, employees, and the communities in which we operate our data centers is certainly a big topic. And then there's a regulatory, framework around that as well, around data and data privacy and GDPR and where data resides. And I think that's also got companies thinking about where they should be located and their proximity to customer data and personal data.
And before you came on the podcast today, I did read a little about Equinix's Global Interconnection Index, the GXI Volume 4. Can I ask that you offer a bit of background on that and some of the key findings from that too?
Yeah, so listeners understand what that is. Yeah. That's basically it's us taking a read on the amount of data that flows between the data centers. So not the public internet, it's private activity. So that's growing at a rate of, we're looking at 45% compound growth per annum if you look at the volumes of data. So that's significant if you map out the next three to 5 years. So we mentioned GDPR regulations, and 27% of our respondents are concerned about GDPR regulations and where that data sits. In the Irish context, we've got a whole bunch of enterprises now looking to accelerate their digital transformation. and we've got over 63%, I think, has COVID has triggered that to move a little faster than they had anticipated. So I think it's sitting now in all IT strategies for all enterprises. Digital and digital transformation is kind of top of the agenda.
Yeah, and there's some big global trends out there at the moment, especially around digital transformation and regulatory compliance. I'm curious, how has that impacted Equinix's growth trajectory? Has it been a positive step for you guys?
So we've seen, there was accelerated growth last year. If you just think about household names like Zoom and Netflix and any of the big content providers that are customers of ours, there was huge spikes in uses of those applications. So bandwidth capacity was increased significantly to support remote working and activity from home. So that's seeing growth. I think in general terms, given the scale of our business, growth stays very steady. I think my own personal belief is that we're on the start of an upward trend around, enterprises in particular and their adoption. I think we're only really at the early stages of that curve. And if you look at the tech trends that we had in Ireland, over 54% of those businesses are looking at, increasing their spend. IT budget spend is going up around digital transformation. I can see that just accelerating further. So I think I think we've positioned ourselves well at the moment around, our global footprint, the cloud service providers access that we have within those data centers on the fabric. And I think just in general terms around having the capacity to scale growth for our larger customers. So I think we're in a pretty good position.
And I also read that Equinix has recently released some findings from its Global Tech Trends Survey. So can I ask that you expand on some of the insights from that as well for everyone listening?
Yeah, I still think, we're probably going to end up repeating ourselves here, Neil, a bit. Yeah. So a lot of the trends are the same. The global trends are very similar to the Irish trends. If you look at enterprises, yeah. and I, in the sense of enterprise, I'm saying enterprises that have global reach and maybe not just companies that are located just to one country. So we're seeing the adoption of our services and the use of the fabric as a way for businesses to accelerate their growth and access new markets, new partners, new ecosystems to sort of get ahead of where they need to be. And rather than, the alternative here is deploying this themselves, opening up offices, finding facilities to host infrastructure, getting contracts with telecoms companies, getting contracts with cloud service providers. This is something is turnkey solution within our infrastructure. So, as I said earlier on, I think that we're just at the beginning of that. Well, we're not. It's already started, but it's accelerating at a pace.
And from these reports and the insights and the findings and everything that you've shared, is there anything that has surprised you, or as someone that's deep in the heart of the industry, or is, for the most part, is it everything that you expected?
I suppose the speed with which some born on the internet companies are used to doing this, and I think that some of the adoption, the speed of which some companies have moved, or the speed at which they haven't moved, I suppose, has been surprising me a bit. Obviously we eat, drink and sleep this, and we assume that everyone should be doing it because we can see the benefits of it. But some enterprises, have to go through, there are regulatory issues for them to go through, depending on where data is located. They've also got to look at legacy applications, and some applications, just to be honest, aren't, do well in the cloud, and they need to keep them dedicated. So what we're finding is a lot of hybrid cloud infrastructure, where we've got dedicated infrastructure that's got dedicated applications on it that sit in the data center, and then they're also connecting into the cloud service providers to further applications and services that they need. So it's a blend between the two.
And at the beginning of our conversation, you did mention sustainability, and there is such a huge focus on this all around the world in every industry at the moment. And one of the reasons I brought it up as well is I believe Equinix is part of the Climate Neutral Data Center Operator Pact and Self-Regulatory Initiative. So can you tell me a little bit more about that initiative? Because it's quite a mouthful, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So CNDCP, I think, is probably the acronym that most people use for. But anyway, so that started, announced in March of this year, but it's been 2 years of work. And what's very exciting about this, I would say, is that it captures, it's a collaboration of 80% of the industry at the moment in Europe, where they've come together to say, we as an industry are going to be climate neutral by 2030. And that's in line with the European Union's Europe Fit for the Digital Age, the European Green Deal, and that's kind of tied into the European Climate Law. So the European Union have effectively asked our industry collectively, and I'd say that covers everybody. Can you guys, look at 2030 as a target for being carbon neutral across our data center footprint? So that process has started, and that the pact is effectively and it's great. The great thing about the collaboration is that it's a whole bunch of competitors working together for the greater good of climate and the planet. So it's quite an exciting initiative, and I'm fairly deeply involved in that with my sustainability hat on for Equinix in EMEA.
Fantastic. And we did begin the conversation talking about your origin story. I'm going to throw something else at you now, because a question I always like to ask every tech guest at the end of our conversation is if there was a particular song that's been the soundtrack to their life, inspired them in their career, or just helps them get their mind in the zone before going to a big meeting or going on stage for a keynote. And then we add all those songs to a Spotify playlist. Is there a particular song or piece of music that means anything to you? And is there a story behind that choice?
God, there's lots of songs that mean the different things to me. Motivated songs, I suppose. I know, if I'm looking to really get myself motivated, Staring at the Rue Boys by the Ruts.
Beautiful.
Yeah, one of my favorite songs. And then depending on the mood might swing to different songs. But if I'm looking to get genned up, that's the one.
Love it. Great choice. I'll add that to the playlist. And for everyone listening that would like to find out more information about Equinix or contact a member of your team to continue the conversation we start today, what's the best way of doing that?
Sorry, Neil, I missed that last question.
So what's the best place for people to find out more information about Equinix, contact your team?
So onto Equinix.ie is the Irish website. Obviously Equinix.com is a global one. Looking for any sustainability, it's sustainability@equinix.com. So they're all available, and all the contact details, all the data centers are all on those websites.
Well, I love the journey that you've been on, and in particular the journey you're continuing to move forward with, especially around sustainability. But more than anything, just thank you for taking the time to come on here and share your story with me today.
Quite great to talk to you. Thanks, Neil.
With over 20 years' experience in the data centre, today's guest has been a key figure in the rise of the data centre industry in Ireland, and is also highly regarded as a thought leader in Ireland's potential to be a global digital hub. And his expertise really shined in today's conversation for me. So I cannot thank him enough for coming on, sharing his insights, and also talking about that survey and how it found that 2/3 of IT decision makers in Ireland feel more susceptible to data breaches due to the IT strain associated with pandemic-driven remote working. Again, these words are going to resonate with business leaders all over the world, and I'd love to hear your insights, your struggles, how you've overcome challenges, and any questions you might have, whether it be for me or today's guest. And you can contact me at techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. Keep those messages coming in. Let's keep this conversation going, and I'll return again tomorrow with another guest. So a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.